Hey everyone, and welcome to the Rare Liquid podcast. Today I'm speaking with Josh, who went to Lehigh for his undergrad and then worked at Bain as a consultant for 3 years before getting his MBA at Wharton, and he'll be returning to the firm after his MBA as well. We're going to be going through a lot of what it's like working at one of the top consulting firms and share lots of tips about how you can break in as well. So hope you all enjoyed the episode. Before we get started with this interview though, did you know that more than 60% of all consultants at McKinsey, Bain, and BCG have MBAs? This means that if you want to work in consulting, at some point you're probably going to need to get an MBA. And that's why I want to let you know about Target Test Prep, or TTP, which I credit a lot for helping me get a 750 on the GMAT. Target Test Prep has now helped over 300,000 students crush the GMAT for 16 years and covers quant, verbal, and data insights for the GMAT focus, with 52 rigorous chapters broken into over 1,500 lessons, over 4,000 realistic GMAT problems, over 1,300 instructor-led videos, 1,200 digital flashcards for studying on the go, and live online support from GMAT focus experts. Target Test Prep is also the only company on GMAT Club with a perfect 5-star rating, and they also have the highest score improvement guarantee of 130 points. You're able to personalize your study plan and practice tests to whatever works best for you. And so if you're interested, you can try out TTP for 5 days completely for free using my link in this episode's description and get 15% off if you use my code rareliquid15. Well, Josh, thanks so much for joining and making the time to chat. Can you start off by giving us an overview of your background?
Sure. First, I just want to say thank you for having me. I've been listening to different podcasts from your channel and really enjoying them. And I think what you're doing to open up and demystify all these different business fields and careers is really a noble pursuit.
Thank you.
I'm very glad to be here.
Awesome.
So to answer your question, my professional background, I would say, starts at undergrad. I went to Lehigh University, which is a school in Eastern Pennsylvania. There I studied industrial engineering and business. I was in an interdisciplinary business and engineering program that I really loved at Lehigh because it taught us engineering skills, it taught us business skills, and it taught us the in-between, which is why I became interested in consulting while in school, because in my perspective, consulting is a lot of the in-between. You are understanding how the product works and you're understanding the business side of it. So I started my career at Bain in San Francisco. I spent a few years there, including a short-term externship at a technology startup that I'm happy to share more about, before starting at Wharton, which is how we got to know each other. We're classmates. And I've spent the last 2 years at Wharton really enjoying business school, and then off to the next adventures when I graduate in a few weeks.
Right. And what got you interested in San Francisco? Because you were on the East Coast. Like, why did you choose the SF office?
San Francisco connected the dots on the things that I was studying in school. You know, San Francisco, as is fairly intuitive, is a technology hub and attracts people who are interested in engineering and business. And those are things that I was studying in school and really enjoying it, and was willing to take a bit of a risk. I grew up in New Jersey and went to school in Pennsylvania, so moving to California was a foreign place. But I thought San Francisco would be a great place to start my career, and I'm really happy that I made the move and went on the adventure.
And when you mentioned that you studied industrial engineering, is that what kind of sciences were you studying, or were you also learning how to code at all, or what kind of classes were you taking?
There's almost two sides of industrial engineering. There is a manufacturing side and there is a operations side. The manufacturing side is more of a traditional version of industrial engineering. Industrial engineers are hired often to make processes more efficient. So it's how can we make this widget with 1% fewer defects or 15 seconds faster? And so a lot of that is around factory design and optimization. And that was part of what I studied in school. I did a capstone project where me and one of my classmates would wake up aggressively early for our senior year on Friday mornings to drive to a concrete flower pot factory in semi-rural Pennsylvania. And we were there focusing on packaging. So how do you package something? How do you package these flower pots in a way that they don't break, that's cost efficient? So that's very traditional industrial engineering. Then there is the operations business side of it. Some of that is the programming side of it. So I took some classes on algorithms. I took classes on basic computer science. And then there is the business side of it. How do we plan our inventory more efficient? How do we think about our people and our processes? So it's a lot of things nested into one, and is one of the more general engineering fields, which is why you see a lot of industrial engineers end up in business consulting, because it's less of a tactical skill in the same way mechanical engineering or chemical engineering might be.
Got it. Yeah. And when you were talking about making processes more efficient, I was like, that does really sound like it's very well suited for consulting. And how did you first hear about consulting? I mean, for me, when I was in high school, I had no idea what a lot of jobs were. So can you kind of walk us through when you first heard about consulting, when you started kind of seriously preparing for the recruiting process and all of that?
The first time I heard about consulting was my sophomore year. I got an email from the school's consulting club, from Lehigh's consulting club, that they were running a case competition. And it was a chance to demonstrate some business skills, to learn about different businesses and how they worked. And what was a big motivator for me at the time, there was a cash prize for the winning team. And that was fairly motivating. So I ended up joining that competition. I did it with a bunch of my friends, and I fell in love with it. A lot of what I was being taught in the engineering and business program was that the answer was out in the world, not in the classroom. Our professors preached that to us all the time. And me and my friends adopted the same attitude for the case competition. The company we were looking at was a made-up company that was in the healthcare space. And for the next month or so, we spent all of our time talking to doctors and nurses and hospital administrators.
Oh, you went all out.
Yeah. I remember one of my teammates talked about how he interrupted his own doctor's appointment to talk to talk with his doctor. But yeah, we kind of just dove right into that, and we ended up winning the competition. So we took our money and spent, I don't know, somewhere between a quarter and half of it at Buffalo Wild Wings the first day, as you do when you're a college sophomore. But I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I loved the problem-solving aspect of it. I loved the going out in the world aspect of it. And then I got more interested in the consulting club, ended up being the president, and that was where I invested my energy in school, and that translated into getting involved in the recruiting process and seeking how I could make a career out of this.
And then what about the recruiting process for you? What was it like? I mean, were a lot of them coming to campus and you recruited that way? Or did you have to, I don't know, just apply to some job boards of companies? Like what was the recruiting process like for you?
It was a mix. Lehigh has a strong business school and a strong engineering school. And so there were a lot of companies that were coming to recruit, both on the engineering side and the business side. Not every firm recruited at Lehigh, which was a big reason why I wanted to be involved with the school's consulting club. One of the things that I'm most proud of at Lehigh is that with the help of the executive team, the executive board of the consulting club, we hosted a conference that brought different firms to Lehigh and different alumni to Lehigh to speak about careers in consulting. We ended up having a couple hundred students wake up early on a Saturday morning to go, which I am most proud of because that is a really challenging thing to do.
Yeah.
And it still lives on today, which I'm really happy about. But that was sort of how I got familiar with companies, and I applied to some companies who had a recruiting presence at school, and then I applied to others just through their websites or online portals.
And what do you feel like, looking back, was what really helped you the most throughout the recruiting process? Was there anything, first of all, in terms of just like resources that you used, but second, what do you feel like you did really well during the interview process?
Well, the biggest resource I used was other students. This is what, when other recruits or students ask me, how do you navigate the consulting process? I always recommend you go through it with peers or friends. It is really daunting to figure out, where do you want to work? What do you want to do? Every company is going to make you jump through some hoops in a different way. Consulting firms often ask you to complete case interviews, and those are skills that come with practice. And so having a friend to go through with it is a huge advantage. And that's what I did. A lot of the practice I did was with friends. There was one summer where I'd made friends with another student who actually met at that conference, and we'd practice a few times a week. And what was most valuable was not just practicing the interviews, but giving the interviews. Because I found I learned so much from him based on the way he approached problems and he thought about company challenges in a way that I wasn't thinking about them. And that's what made me a much better consultant or a much better interviewer. And so to answer your question, if there's one thing that I did better than other people, I think that's hard to pinpoint. If there was one thing that I did sort of better than everyone else. But I think the thing that made me better over time was just the repetitive practice of case interviews, because it is a skill. It is a skill, and like most skills, it takes practice to get good at.
Yeah. And what about for during case interviews? Were there any, there was a lot of tips out there that people can, I guess, just find online here and there. But I'm wondering if there are any tips that you have that are harder to find or are not as obvious. It could be anything very, very, very small to the bigger picture. Any tips for people recruiting for consulting?
I don't think there's one silver bullet of one thing that makes you perfect at it. I will say often the difference between a good interviewee and a great interviewee is their ability to connect the dots between what they're saying. Consulting interviews have two different styles. There are ones that are interviewer-led, where they drive a lot of the direction of the case. And there are interviews where it's interviewee-led, which is the style that Bain runs, where we're looking to the interviewee to drive the case and say what they want to do next. And the people that are best at case interviews are able to say, you just gave me this new piece of information. We reached this conclusion. That changes what I thought was going on at the beginning of the case. And because of that, I think we should do A or B next. And that's a really advanced skill. And that only comes from practice and pattern recognition after seeing a lot of cases. But when I speak with people who are interviewing and I run practice cases with them, that is the thing that I notice that separates people that are good and the people that are great.
And recruiting processes are always a challenging time for, when you're 18, I don't know, and anywhere from 18 to 21, 22 years old, and you feel like this next job is going to determine almost the rest of your life. How did you feel when you finally got your Bain offer? Do you remember that day and how you felt?
Oh man, I was so happy. I remember being so relieved. I put so much effort into this, and because recruiting, it'd take me a couple tries to get an offer at Bain. I'd spent years thinking about it and preparing for it, and I'd built this company up so strong. I remember, so like I said, it took me 2 tries. So I applied for an associate consultant internship, and I made it through a couple rounds of interview, but I ultimately didn't get the offer. And then I applied again for a full-time role. And I remember calling a friend right after I got out of my final round interview for the internship. And I told him 2 things. One, I really need to work at this company. And 2, I don't think I got the job. And both were right. I really wanted to work there, and I was not good enough to get there. So to answer your question, I just felt this overwhelming feeling of relief that I had achieved the thing that I'd put so much effort into getting. And someone was recognizing that I had the potential to do something that I thought was going to be a really great start to my career.
Wait, so you said you did full-time recruiting, but it didn't work out. And so then at what point did you interview and then get the job?
So I went to Lehigh for 4.5 years because part of the interdisciplinary program, it took me a little bit longer to get essentially 2 bachelor's degrees. I applied for a internship during my senior year, so it would have been the summer after my senior year. That is where I went through a couple rounds of interviews, but then didn't get the role. And then I applied for a full-time job during my 5th year, so the fall of my 5th year, and that's when I got the offer.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then can you walk us through a little bit about, walk us through the training process during the summer? What happens during training when you got to Bain?
When I first started?
Yeah.
This was where I felt that I was really fortunate that I immediately felt that I'd made the right choice in going to Bain. So I was starting in the San Francisco office. I was starting with approximately 60 other people. We were split into 4 groups of about 15 students that had staggered starting dates. So my starting date was in July. I started with about 15 people. And the first 2 weeks on the job, we go through a training we call pre-associate consultant training or pre-ACT. In those 2 weeks, it felt like a smooth transition from college because it's almost like a classroom setting. You're in the room with the same 15 people, and people are just coming in throughout the day telling you different things, from really important things like where are the bathrooms to practical job skills like how do you open up Excel, how do you build a model, how should you be interacting with clients. And I loved that experience. It was really relaxing to be starting with other students or other former students who maybe like me felt a little bit apprehensive about the job or just nervous to start their career. Then after that, I went to, that was pre-ACT. Then I went to ACT, which is associate consultant training. And I also loved that too. Bain has a very global model, both for how we think about working with our clients, but also how we think about our own people. In ACT, it was in Virginia, and I was with probably a couple hundred other brand new associate consultants from all of our offices around the world. And it was fascinating because the skills and people that Bain look for is very similar globally. And so I found myself kind of seeing myself in other people like, oh, this is what Josh could have been like if he was born in Singapore and lived life there. And that was great because that was treated like a simulated case team experience. There was a senior manager running essentially a team for a week and a half, and you were working through a fake client scenario. And that was really helpful to build some confidence and build some skills before I had to actually do that for a client.
So pre-ACT, 15 other students or other Bain associate consultants. And then where was that one located?
That was in our San Francisco office. That was specific to San Francisco. Then ACT was what we call global training.
And then does Bain do that 4 times because there's 4 different starting dates?
Correct.
I see. Interesting. And when I wanted to ask a little bit about the training, I asked because for banking as well, when I went to banking, there was training. Training doesn't always 100% translate to the actual job because the real job is so much tougher. But you still learn a lot of like the good basics. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about when you were in the training process, because a lot of times students come in without maybe knowing a lot of like what presentations may look like or how, as you say, how to build models and stuff like that. What kind of like training were you doing on the job? So I guess what kind of training were you doing in the training sessions where you said a consultant came in, they walk you through a case? Like what did all of that look like in more detail?
Sure. Some of the trainings were very bite-sized. I remember, for example, there was a senior associate consultant. So that's the role typically about 2-3 years into starting. He came in and taught us all some basic Excel skills. So we have some unique charting tools that we use. And so he taught us how to make some basic charts, taught us how to use some shortcuts in Excel, gave us a little bit of the seeds of what we might learn or need on the job. Now, that was, let's say, 3 hours. That's not going to prepare you for everything you need to know on the job, or at least if you can learn everything you need to know on the job in 3 hours, that maybe we should be thinking more of what we can achieve. But it was a lot of trainings like that, where some of them were very practical on the job skills. Some of them were challenging us to think a little bit bigger about our careers. So we had a partner come in and think about what could a career trajectory look like at Bain. Maybe you could consider going to business school, something that I'm doing now. So that was the pre-ACT experience. That was in the office. That was small groups. Then the ACT experience is designed to feel a little bit more like you're on a case team. And some people do it right when they start. Some people do it roughly in the first 6 months of after they started. So some people have real case experience at that point. And a lot of what you're learning is maybe some of the skills that are useful for the job from a tactical perspective, like how to use PowerPoint, how to use Excel. A lot of it, however, is how to work in a team and how to become better collaborators. Because the teams that you're in, the simulated teams, are comprised of people at the associate consultant level, you are stepping into more elevated roles than you might actually own or hold on a team. Someone becomes a little bit more of a consultant style role or a little bit more of a lead role. And that gets you to test some of your team working skills in a way that you can do it without having the same stakes as you would when you're with your team day to day.
Got it. And then when you think about your first, let's say 3-ish, 6 months on the job, you're probably working on a project, maybe on client site. What were those first 3 to 6 months like?
I was a little intimidated when I started, but I was surprised how quickly I felt supported and cared for at the beginning. There's a couple ways that Bain does that. So because of the nature of consulting, you're always working with different people. In my 3 years, I probably had, I don't know, anywhere between 6 and 10 different supervisors and managers. So you're working with a lot of people all the time. However, you have what we call a PD advisor or performance professional development advisor. Your PD advisor is a persistent source of mentorship throughout that time. They're the person that is looking out for your career, understanding how you're progressing across multiple teams and multiple years. And I had a really fantastic PD advisor when I started. He ultimately left Bain, and I ended up working for him at the externship that I did. But then I had a new PD advisor who was just as strong and ended up joining his team too. And so in the first couple months, the job is challenging for 2 reasons. It's challenging because you need to learn the processes that we go through. And then it's also challenging because you need to learn the actual content of the work itself. You have to learn how to build a model or design slides in PowerPoint. But then you also have to understand a client and industry that maybe you haven't had a lot of experience in, and that was my case. So you get both sides of it, and that's challenging. Over time, you understand the process a little bit more, and you maybe get more reps seeing similar patterns across clients that are in similar industries. And so both those get better over time. That's when you can move into a role where you're having direct client relationships, being more of the thought leader on the team, and that comes over time with experience.
And how did you feel like what kind of resources were available for you to get smart on an industry really quickly? Because when you're in consulting, you might jump from project to project, different industry to different industry. And when you're first out of college, you may not have any experience in that industry. So what resources are available for consultants to really ramp up on an industry?
There's a lot. We have a huge sort of collection of intellectual property, IP, about different clients and industries and topics. And we use that to equip teams to start and hit the ground running. Often we're also working with clients multiple times. And so sometimes the reference material are, what did we do for this company 6 months ago or 2 years ago? And that is a helpful starting point to understand maybe where they're coming from or what were some of the decisions you made last time. The other resource that is tremendously valuable, and I think a lot of people maybe miss this when they're seeing it from the outside, they have this perspective of, how can someone in their 20s be telling a CEO what to do when they don't have the same level of experience? Bain is very much a one-team place. So yes, maybe I don't have 20 years of experience working in XYZ industry, but I do have a partner on the team who does have that 20 years of experience, or I do have a manager who has 10 years of experience in that industry or working with similar clients. And so it's a collective effort. We turn to them to give us advice and guidance because they've seen a lot more things. Maybe they have a long-standing relationship with this client or their competitors, and that's really useful. So it's not just on you to be the one to understand everything right away. You have a team there to support you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I do think that's a little misrepresented because it isn't the 20-year-old who just graduated is hardly ever really telling the CEO what to do.
Yeah.
You create a deliverable together, and it's not like a partner is going to go into PowerPoint and then build a model, look through all of like the survey data or the customer calls and all of that, right? So I do feel like that's funnily sometimes misrepresented. But I also wanted to ask about what you feel like made Bain such a good fit for you, because as you were kind of talking about your recruiting process, it seemed like this was really like your top firm at the time. And what was it about Bain that really attracted you?
There were several things that really attracted me. The two that are most salient to me is that one, I thought everyone that I had interviewed with or interacted with was really brilliant. And that was really impressive to me. If I thought about all the times in life where I had been more successful than I thought I was going to be, it was because I had people that were smarter than me helping me out. Like the times I did well in school, I had smarter friends than me who were helping me study and get better. And Bain felt like the best opportunity to continue that. Everyone I talked with was smart and kind and good people. The other thing is that I thought it'd be a great place to jumpstart my career. I looked at the problems that Bain was solving. I looked at the types of clients they were working with. It just seemed like a comprehensive way to get a bunch of core business skills that maybe apply to consulting for the rest of my career, or maybe I apply to the next thing that I do. So it was great people and interesting work, and it felt like a great fit for me.
And on the note of the kind of skills that you develop, were there any particular personal and or professional skills you feel like you really developed maybe within the first year, and then within the first year we could start with that.
Oh, so many. It's kind of a fascinating job because some days in the moment, it doesn't feel like you are getting better or good at your job. But anytime I had that feeling, it was helpful to just look back to where I was 6 months before and see how much progress that I made. So I learned a ton on the job. The things that the area of the job that I think I did the best at was on the client communication side. That was a part of the job and is a part of the job that I really enjoy. And I managed to find managers and partners who were willing to give me a lot of opportunities to speak with clients directly pretty early on in my career. So from the beginning, the first team that I was on, I was in all of our client workshops. Maybe I was in the background to start by taking notes, but within a few months, they allowed me to start leading some discussions or start presenting some of the analysis that I was doing. And that just continued from there to by the end, by I was in 3 years, which I know doesn't answer your question, but 3 years in, I got to own some client relationships directly. And that's where I found the job to be most rewarding because I could have a lot of impact and I could learn a lot. And I felt very valued both by our teams, but also by the clients as well.
And that's probably one of the most important skills you can actually develop, especially as you go more and more senior. And I wanted to ask also maybe on the personal side, because that's, I guess, a professional skill, but although being good with people is also a personal one as well. But I mean, to give you some context as to why I asked this question, like when I was working in banking, I feel like there were so many personal lessons I took away from it. And so I'm wondering if any come to mind for you.
Oh, that's a good question. There was one team that I was on, and the partner was brilliant at asking people really insightful questions. It can be challenging when you're a consultant because you come into a business that is already moving at 1,000 miles an hour. We have relatively short time frames to be useful and impactful. And sometimes clients fairly are skeptical of that. You know, you're coming in as an outsider, you have a limited amount of time. And how are you supposed to know how I can do my job better when you don't see the bigger picture? And anytime he was challenged, he asked really insightful questions. You know, he would ask, he wouldn't get defensive. He would say, you know, tell me what I'm not understanding, or it seems like this is a challenge, but maybe I'm wrong here. Help point me in the right direction. And adopting his mindset of when someone challenges you, asking some more probing questions before you jump to a conclusion and get angry or defensive yourself is really useful in my own life. So I found that I was like doing that with my friends or with my parents of just with my partner, asking more questions before coming to conclusions. So, you know, Bain has helped me in a lot of ways professionally, but that has made me also just a better, more compassionate person and friend.
And it seems like having a strong sense of like curiosity is also part of the culture at Bain. It's kind of what it seems like. And I was wondering if you could also dive a little bit more into Bain's culture. What kind of people does it attract? Are there certain people that may not be a good fit for Bain? Like, how would you describe Bain's culture?
I would describe Bain's culture in a couple ways. First, most people, I would say everyone that I worked with, is really ambitious. And that translates both their professional life, but also their personal life. Like, people aren't just bakers, they're like world-class bakers as their hobbies, or like they don't just ride bikes, they do Ironmans. You know, like everyone takes whatever hobby they have or interest they have to the extreme. And it's the same at work too. A lot of people try to over-deliver. They want to strive for more and exceed for better opportunities. And at the same time, it's a very collaborative place. So that can go really wrong if everyone is striving but isn't collaborative. But Bain is a really collaborative place. You always have people mentoring you and looking out for you. And it's a core part of not only how you succeed, but also how your performance is measured. Our performance is broken into 3 categories. It's essentially your ability to do the problem-solving analytical aspects of the job, your ability to work with clients, and then also your ability to be a great teammate. And being a great teammate means not just looking out for yourself, mentoring and coaching other people. And that weighs a lot on how you succeed and grow within the firm. And that combination, I think, is what makes Bain's culture really special. You have people that are really ambitious and really smart and want to achieve a lot, but also are looking out for the other people around them.
And one of my friends at Bain who interned there over the summer, I don't know if this is just an intern thing, but let me know, told me about like the question of the day or something. Did you guys also have that as well?
Some of the teams do that, yeah.
Okay, so that's not a universal Bain thing?
Not necessarily. If I know what you're thinking about, share, what was your friend doing?
I think, well, she was also in SF. She interned there as an MBA, and it was something like someone comes up with a question each morning for the team, and then you guys like answer it together. But it can either be like not a pure brain teaser, but something like more fun. So it was like, would you rather fight 1,000 chickens or one like chicken-sized 1,000 chicken-sized horses or one horse-sized chicken or something like that. It kind of gets your brain thinking, but it's supposed to be a little fun. Did you guys like have that as well?
Some of the teams that I was on, often most teams start with a morning check-in to go over your priorities and plan for the day. And usually, it starts off with some sort of, fun question or just a way to like get everyone warmed up for the day. It also is helpful as an aside, as a good way to learn and understand people. Like you can ask like, what do you like to do? What is like my question that I always used to throw in is what is the most underrated candy? Because I found people always have takes on what they care about and what they think is underrated relative to everyone else. But then when it was someone's birthday or it's an important day, I would like get them a Take 5 bar because I knew that was what they cared about. So I really like the question of the day because it's a way to have fun and start things, but also get to know each other.
You used the word underrated, so I actually want to ask, what do you feel like the most underrated thing about consulting?
That is a good question. I don't know that I've really thought about that. I don't know. I don't really have a helpful answer there.
Okay. No worries. And I wanted to then, I guess, next ask about kind of like as we were talking about the check-in in the morning, if you could kind of walk us through, I know every project's different, every day could be different, but if you could kind of walk us through what your day looked like, and if you could provide even details like, we had the question of the day, things that normally are hard to really find elsewhere. Any kind of details you could provide? Can you walk us through a day in the life of a consultant at Bain?
Sure. So to your point, as you mentioned, every day's a little different. Every client's a little different. Also, a lot of the day-to-day is variable based on how the senior manager who's running the team and the partners like to structure their days. But, typical day, we would start with a morning check-in. That is the whole team. And by the team, I mean the senior manager, the person running the team, and maybe the 4 to 6 people that are working under them, and they represent the core nucleus of the team. We would meet for 30 minutes, do a question of the day, do something to warm up, like have fun. Then the senior manager who's running the meeting would share anything they've learned since our team last checked in, which was probably the previous afternoon or early evening. So maybe they talked to some clients overnight, maybe they learned some information, maybe the partners related information, things that are critical for the team to know. Then we would go over our team priorities. Often teams are broken into smaller groups called teamlets, which are 1 or 2 people working on a specific topic. So teamlets would give their little update of what they're working on the day, maybe some of the immediate deadlines, maybe the questions they had based on what they're working on the previous evening. Discuss through that. Let's say we've solved everything, we break out, and then you go off and do what you need to do. Maybe that is going on a client meeting. Maybe that is completing a set of analyses. Maybe by the time I got to my 3rd year, I was supervising people. So maybe I was talking with the person that I'm supervising, making sure they have the information they need to get the work done that they need to. That is sort of the way the rest of the day goes until early afternoon, where you do the same thing as the morning, but you're regrouping. So now we've learned all this information about the day. Maybe we need to change our plans for the rest of the week or even for tomorrow. And then we're, going over priorities, making sure we know questions. That way we can generally limit the communication as a team after, and people can go and work more independently. The goal on most of the teams was try to have not too many interdependencies after that afternoon check-in. There'd be times where you check in back and forth, but you have more time to work independently, which is where you can sometimes work your most efficiently. The other thing that we would do, and this was universal on every team, is that we have weekly meetings we call CTMs or case team meetings. It often takes place over lunch. You're getting together with your team. It's fun. You are doing, even more elaborate versions of question of the day. I have had teams where we would play a game where you would submit responses to questions, So like, for example, like what's the most underrated candy? And then you would guess who are the other people answering them. And you'd ask creative or weird questions because then you could get creative or weird responses out of people. And then we'd keep score and we'd come up with fake prizes. We also do more intentional things where one of the things we do every week is we take a pulse check survey as to how the team is going and how you're feeling. Are you doing the things outside of work that you want to get done? And we'll go through that survey response. There's also one person on each team that's called an ombuds person. Their job is to be the voice of the people on the team. That way the team members feel like they can relay feedback anonymously, if they want to, back to the manager or the leadership of the team. And if they want to make changes, they have a person who's advocating for them. And so it's a mix of fun and it's a mix of productive things for the team. But that is a typical day. It'll vary a little bit day to day. But that's kind of how most days work.
Got it. And it sounded like each project or case you're working on could be a little bit different and almost like for some teams they have question of the day, some don't and all of that. But who do you feel like is usually the position that is setting the culture for each project, if that makes sense? Like, is it the senior manager? Like, I know from having interned at Deloitte and talking to my friends who are in consulting, like partners are they have a lot of different projects going on. So they may be traveling from place to place. Like, who are the ones really setting the culture of the team for each project?
It's probably twofold. The senior manager or the associate partner, they're the person that's really running the operation of the team day to day, as I mentioned. So they have an outsized impact on how the team runs and how the team feels because they're the ones delegating work, assigning topics. They are the conduit between the partners and the team. And so they're relaying information back and forth. So they have a lot of impact on how the culture of the team works. That said, everyone has an impact and a role to play on the team. And I've worked on teams where the associate consultant is a huge culture carrier for the team. That's like a term we like to use. They're a culture carrier. They're the ones making sure we're playing fun games. They're bringing energy. Often because they're the ones most deep in the numbers, they're providing some of the most critical information for our client work as well. So culture is collective, even if people have hierarchical responsibilities. Culture comes from the whole team, not just from one person.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying this episode with Josh so far. I wanted to just pause here and let you guys know about a How to Get Into MBA course that I recently announced called Liquid MBA, in case you're trying to break into a top MBA program just like Josh. The course provides access for all aspects of the MBA application process, access to a library of admitted essays, of which there are 10 per school, and super detailed school-specific advice covering things like student life, academics, clubs, resources, leadership opportunities, essays, and even 30 secrets for each MBA program. We have a 24-hour free trial, so you can check out the course for free, and also a no-risk money-back guarantee if you don't get into at least one MBA program. We also provide lifetime access to our Discord community where you can connect with peers and get additional support from me and my team. Admissions consultants often charge $400 to $700 per hour, which is crazy to me. And so for the price of a 1-hour call with a consultant, you get everything I discussed and a whole lot more. So I really am trying to make Liquid MBA a really good deal for you and a no-brainer. So if any of this is of interest to you, be sure to use my code SUMMER25 by the end of August to get 25% off. And you can check us out at liquidmba.com, and I'll leave a link and information about everything discussed in this episode's description. And can you actually walk us through some of the responsibilities you have for each of the roles? So like associate consultant and as you move up all the way to partner?
Sure. So I'll preface this by saying that there are all different types of careers people take at Bain. Some people go to school, some people switch to internal rotations, and I could talk more about that if you're curious too. But if we take the most linear version of a role, you'd come out of undergrad or a couple of years of working experience. You would start as an associate consultant. That's a role for a couple of years. Then you move into a senior associate consultant role, or SAC. Then you can either stay with the firm and promote internally, or like me and like a lot of people, you go to business school. Then you come back as a consultant for a couple of years. You move into a manager as your third year, and a manager is a testing ground before you're ready to run a full team. And so you're sort of halfway between being responsible for your own work, but also being responsible for running a team and owning more direct client relationships. If that goes well, you become a senior manager. That role lasts for a couple of years. You become a associate partner. APs run the sort of transitory role between they're still running a team, but solely over time, they're passing off more of that responsibility to the point when they're ready to become a partner. And as you said, work for multiple clients at the same time. They're owning really important, really critical client relationships. They're the ones that are talking to the CEOs and the CFOs. So that's the career path overall. Your responsibilities change, sometimes with your title change, but more often when you're ready for the next level of responsibility. And that's something I really loved about Bain too, is that titles matter only to a point. If you prove that you were ready to be in a client meeting 3 months in, then you would be in a client meeting 3 months in. Or if you prove that you were a master analyst and could own a really complicated model, even before maybe the playbook says you're supposed to, people would give you that responsibility. It's a place where the goal lines are always moving. But to get more concrete with it, generally when you're starting, you're more of a expert on data and information. So you're building models, you're doing analysis on them. Maybe you're building part of the output for clients, but you have someone who's above you, who's supervising you, who's helping to think about the direction of how does this tie to more broadly what we're doing. Over time, you become what we call a work stream lead, where you're responsible for a whole topic on your own. And maybe you have someone you're supervising under that. For most people, that comes around the third year, your SAC level. Then it's somewhat similar when you go back to business school, but you probably own more client relationships. And that trend continues over time, where you're stepping a little bit more out of the analysis and you're stepping more into client roles. But I've had partners who also build a model sometimes, and then they because a lot of people come through the ranks, they still have an AC in them, and sometimes they just want to get in the data and do a bunch of analysis because that's what's going to get them the best answer for the clients.
Yeah. There's nothing like doing the work yourself, I guess, to really feel confident sometimes.
Yeah.
And you've spent a few years as an AC at Bain. So what do you feel like makes, for just focusing on that level, a really good consultant in that post-undergrad role?
I think the best ACs are really curious people. It is a challenging job, as I mentioned before, because you're often learning new processes and new industries and new companies. And you're learning them really quickly. And we don't have the luxury of spending 2 years trying to understand a company and its problems before we can be useful. Often we have a week or 2 weeks before we have to be useful. And so people that are really good at being ACs are people that are naturally really curious because they want to dig in the data. They want to learn more about how this company works, how this industry works, what their problems are. And so people that are really curious often succeed in the role. The second thing you have to be really good at is being dynamic. The job changes all the time. You know, you might go into a Monday morning with a plan for how the next 4 days are going to look like, and then you're talking with your team Friday afternoon, and the last 4 days were nothing like what you thought they were going to be because you learned all this information throughout the week. And so you have to be really flexible and dynamic. You have to be willing to take on new information and adapt what you need to. And then finally, the people that are successful are willing to take feedback. Because we move in really tight timelines, because we move dynamically, because it is a high-paced job, you're always getting feedback, which is really helpful to get better at the job. But it's a skill, in the same way giving feedback is a skill, receiving feedback is also a skill. And so you get better at understanding, what are they trying to tell me? How can I action that? How can I turn that into being better at my job? So those are the 3 skills I think make you really successful.
Yeah, that feedback one is a really good one. And I wanted to ask then, were there any feedback, constructive feedback that you received that you really took to heart, that you feel like was some of the best feedback you'd received on the job? Do you mind sharing anything that comes to mind?
Yes. The best supervisor I had, he was phenomenal at the job and was just a tremendous supervisor. He had recently finished his MBA. He got it from Kellogg, and I'm probably going to butcher the name, but I think it was called the M3 program or the 3M program at Kellogg, which is
the marketing one?
Yeah, it's about like sort of marketing and data communication and product design. And he was a really creative thinker. And he used to build these slides that blew me away. They were always a little bit different than maybe how we normally communicate, but were visually stunning and brought people to the answer and the decision really quickly. And I was in awe with his ability to do that. So I asked him for help on how to get better at communicating with data. And we spent probably 3 months together in our check-ins and directly in the feedback that he was giving my work and how to become a much better data visualizer and data communicator. And that was one of the times I felt most proud on the job. There was a meeting we had with a client where I'd spent all this time making these charts that I thought were beautiful. And they were beautiful not because they used fancy colors or pretty graphics, but because they brought the client to the decision they needed to make really quickly. And we presented in a meeting and a decision was made in like 15 seconds. And this client was not good at making decisions in 15 seconds. And the absence of a deep conversation was a huge sense of accomplishment. And I owe it all to him mentoring me and coaching me to get there.
And what do you feel like was the most challenging part of the job? Because as you were kind of talking about some of the skills you developed, it's can't be like an easy job from the get-go. So what do you feel like were some of the challenges you faced as a consultant?
The challenges often tie to the rewarding aspects of the job. And sometimes I feel like that's like a truism in life. Like sometimes working hard for something and getting it done feels much more satisfying than just getting something done. But the thing that is challenging about Bain is that the bar is always being raised. As we talked through the career trajectory, as soon as you get comfortable in a skill, your supervisor, your team, the partners, they're asking you to do more and to push and be better at what you're doing. And as I mentioned a couple times in this conversation, it's really valuable because you look back on where you were 6 months before even, and you can see dramatic change in what you've done. But it can also be challenging too, because you feel like, I just figured out the skill. Let me just relax and lean into that. And often they say, you're good at that. Like, let's put you on a new team. Let's give you more responsibility. Let's see what you're good at analysis. Now teach someone else how to do it. Now mentor someone else. And it is challenging, but it makes you a lot better at the job. And then when you get good at something on the new skill, it's very rewarding too, because you're learning and growing all the time.
And for those who are just entering into consulting now, do you have any concrete, practical small tips that you could provide? So I know some of my friends, I think they said what they like to do is provide an end of the day or end of the week email updating their managers with what they've been working on, what they plan to do in the future, or it could be productivity tips or hacks, things that for me, what I would tell people going into banking, analysts, is print out your slides when you can, and then literally go through them hand by hand or pen and paper, because you usually catch so many mistakes that way. And always leave a printed copy in your manager's desk before leaving, because that way they can check it over and stuff and give you comments. That was very common in banking, but most people don't know about it at the beginning. Is there anything that that comes to mind for you?
I liked your idea, or I like what you're talking about in terms of giving frequent updates to your team. It can feel like a lot of work to write those sometimes, but they have a twofold impact. One is it keeps the people around you informed. And that's really useful because sometimes you have questions you need to answer, or sometimes you're just moving in the wrong direction. And so giving someone around you an opportunity to weigh in and say, maybe that analysis is not as important, or maybe the answer you're reaching towards isn't really what we're looking for, because they might have more information or context. So that is really useful. And sometimes it's an end of day thing. It's helpful to have more strict rules when you first start. And then over time, you understand when are the right times where I need to do this. Maybe I don't need to do this every day. But when you're starting, it can be useful to do that every day. The other thing that I did over time, which I found really effective, is that I used my calendar like a to-do list. So rather than writing down to-do lists all the time, I would block off time in my calendar and label it with activities to do. And that I found was really helpful because it allowed me to compartmentalize rather than saying, these are the 20 things that I have to do. I could say, well, these 10 I can do tomorrow because I blocked out time for them. And then I don't have to stress about doing the thing that I'm doing now and also the thing that I'm doing next. That's going to change and evolve over time. But using my calendar like a to-do list was really helpful. And I do it in business school now all the time too.
And can you next, I guess, walk us through one of the projects that you've worked on? And you can, of course, leave out client names or just keep things very general and broad. But I think it'd be helpful to give people a taste of what a project looks like and I guess I should also caveat for you, projects look so different depending on the industry, depending on what the client needs, but anything that you worked on that you could share.
Sure. So to your point, I can only share some information. Broadly, I've had several different clients. One that I found particularly interesting was we were working for a large technology company, and they were going through a series of acquisitions, and we were helping them figure out how do we go from a big company that has acquired a couple smaller ones to one cohesive company. And there's all different decisions you have to make after you, there's the acquisition phase, but then there's also the merging together, right? Like, the two halves of M&A. Mm-hmm. And so we were doing a lot of the merger piece. What does it look like to go together? What do your teams look like? What are your goals as a business overall? What might be some of the financial projections you can do with that? So we did a whole bunch of work for them, but broadly they were all under the umbrella of how do we integrate these three companies together.
Mm. And because you worked in San Francisco at Bain, and you kind of talked before about how Bain thinks very globally, mm-hmm. but I've also heard that Bain staffs very locally. Can you talk a little bit about Bain's staffing structure, and did you travel at all when you were at Bain, as in like taking flights, or were you mostly just in SF and didn't have to go too far?
Mm-hmm. To answer the second piece first, a lot of the work that I did was during COVID, and we weren't traveling a ton anyway. I was like barely leaving my apartment, let alone flying around the world. Mm. But there were times where I did travel for clients. There was one client I had in the Midwest. That was when I first started, and so I was flying out there every other week from San Francisco. But to answer your question more holistically, Bain employs a home office staffing model, which is one of the things that I really love about the firm. When you are up for staffing, meaning you are due to join a new team, you have a conversation with a person called a staffing manager. These are specific to the office or the region that you're in. So San Francisco, their own staffing managers, and there was a staffing manager specifically for associate consultants and senior associate consultants. So their whole job was to oversee this population of people, and their responsibility was making sure people are set up on the right project with the right case, and putting them on a team where the senior manager or the associate partner is from the same office. So as much as possible, you're working with people that are from your office. And that's really valuable for building long-lasting relationships because, when the team disbands 6 or 9 months later, now these are the people you see around the office. These are the people you can have lunch with. These are the people you can have informal conversations with. So the home office staffing model is excellent for that. And sometimes it leads to fewer travel. Sometimes you work on local clients. It's not always the case, but given you have a nucleus of a team around one region, it tends to be that you have more localized clients.
Mm-hmm. And did you find that the SF Bain office had a particular culture versus other offices? Or I don't know, I guess for consulting also during COVID in particular, you're not... I've heard consultants, you don't always go to the office Friday. Like if you previously, before COVID, like Monday to Thursday travel, Friday go into the office, but sometimes you don't need to go. Some people do go. And like a lot of the culture could be felt maybe on those Fridays. But I don't know, was there anything particular about the SF office that made it different?
It's hard to say because I didn't work in other offices. And so it's hard to say if they had smaller things that maybe were specific to their culture. However, I will say that there were times where we had multiple teams at the same client, and sometimes those other teams might have been from other offices. And more often not, the culture and the working style and the people were much more similar than they were different. Mm. And that was true both domestically and globally. I worked with international teams, and those teams also felt very similar and had similar working styles.
So I guess what I would want to ask then is for when recruiting for consulting, particularly for Bain, and because Bain has more of a local staffing model, there are certain cities that may have more, may serve like certain industries more, like SF, I imagine way more tech clients. Whereas maybe New York may be a lot more diverse. Do you feel like how do you think that people recruiting for Bain should think about which office to apply to? Should it just be based on like the city they want to live in? And how should they think about like the particular potential clients they may work with? How would you advise choosing the office?
I think most people choose their office across 2 dimensions. There are the professional reasons to be there, and then there's the personal reasons to be there. The professional reasons, to your point, because we have the home office staffing model, the mix of industries tends to be a little different across the offices. Now, that said, San Francisco, we work with tech companies, we work with financial services firms, we worked in healthcare. It's not that industries are mutually exclusive across different offices. However, some people have interests professionally, and some offices align themselves more to those professional interests. And then there's also the personal side for a lot of people. I remember having a conversation with a Bainee when I was recruiting and trying to make that decision for myself. I grew up on the East Coast. My whole family was out there. I went to school on the East Coast. And I was trying to decide, should I prioritize New York? Should I prioritize San Francisco? And he essentially said that the job is challenging. Don't do things that are going to make it more challenging on you. So if you really want to be in New York because that's where your family is, then prioritize that. Or if you really want to be in Chicago because you have a partner who's got a job there, then go do that. So when people ask me that question, I give them both sides. Find the professional interests and align yourself to that. And also find ways to satisfy your personal interests too, because in general, the job is more similar than it is different across offices. And you will not be your best self if you're not checking the personal boxes that you need to be happy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the next thing I wanted to ask about kind of like the benefits at Bain, and I think consulting firms in general are really great at treating their employees well. Mm-hmm. And this was something I was always envious of when I was in banking, because we would get like $25 for dinner, like Uber's home if you work past 10 p.m. Pretty much no other benefits. But consultants, I think you mentioned to me before this conversation kind of about like jobs at Bain or Bain friends at Bain or something like that. Like there's a job board. My other consultant friends, like when they're moved from one city to another, like the consulting firm covers that. You get per diem for dinners and things like that. Can you walk us through not just like per diems for dinner, but any of the other benefits? Like there's the externship. Like what are the other opportunities and benefits of working at Bain?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton, and that is what keeps people there a long time too. Is that the benefits, to your point, are not just financial benefits like getting dinner. There's a lot of benefits around your learning and development and growth. So one program that I'm hoping to take advantage of when I return back to Bain is our international short-term transfer program. We had slowed some down, obviously, during COVID because you don't want to send people globally when there is a global pandemic. Yeah. But the goal is to send people to work at Bain in different countries because it gets them multinational and global exposure.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Right? Like a lot of the clients that we work for, they are global clients. And so spending 6 months in Australia to understand how Australian business works, or spending 6 months in Latin America to understand the nuances of Latin American culture is really useful. So I'm hoping that when I go back, I can transfer short-term to another country because I think it would be a really unique experience.
Which country are you thinking of?
Oh, good question. Well, I don't have a lot of international language experience, which limits my own capabilities a little bit. However, a lot of the offices we have operate in English. So I would like to go to either Australia or Amsterdam or maybe a Nordic country. I just think it would be a really fascinating work experience and a really cool personal experience as well.
Yeah.
So that's one. The other thing you mentioned, which I can talk about too, is the externship experience. So it's common for people in their third year at Bain to do an externship where they go work at another company for 6 months. Essentially, you become an employee at the other place. You're paid by the other company. You don't have any day-to-day responsibilities back to your team at Bain, but you've committed to go to this experience and then come back to Bain. And at first, when someone told me about it, it didn't make any sense to me. I was like, why would you let your people go do other things instead of having them work for you? But once I got in the program itself, I understood the value of it a lot, and there's all different aspects of it that are valuable. One aspect of it is that you get working experience in another industry and for a company. And the challenge or resistance sometimes clients have to consultants is that we've only lived in the consulting ecosystem. And being out there and working for a company where you're, working, as we would say, like in industry is really useful because you get to know the day-to-day problems that a job actually entails. So I worked for a tech startup, and that was really useful because I got to understand the tech industry a lot better. The second is that it is a way to test different aspects of your career without fully leaving consulting. And I think a lot of people think they want to go work in, let's say, food and beverage, and then they do it for 6 months and they realize, actually, my regular job is better than this. And so they stay. And that's really useful, especially when you're hiring a lot of people directly out of undergrad or even out of MBA that are considering different programs in life or considering different paths. Sometimes testing that is useful to understand what you really like and what you do well at. And then finally, it's a really effective marketing vehicle for Bain because you send someone at a company and you see, hopefully, how effective one person can be. And maybe that company realizes that, oh, maybe I should be hiring more people, or maybe I should just even have a stronger relationship with this firm. And there are a lot of companies that take on a lot of Bain externs because it's a way to stay close to the company and stay and have a good connection with them.
Yeah, and I think what you were talking about reminds me of when people usually say they want to be like a chef or something, and then you try actually working in the kitchen, and you're like, okay, never mind, it's not
like,
for
this
me.
is terrible. I like burn my arm, or like I'm bleeding everywhere. I'm working until 3 a.m. Like I don't think I actually want to be a chef. I think I just like food.
Right, exactly. On the flip side, though, are there there must be some people I have no idea. Are there people who go through the externship and then end up staying with that company?
Sometimes that happens. Yeah, and I think that's part of the thing too. One of the things that I've been surprised by, in a good way, by Bain is that Bain thinks of alumni in the same way schools think of alumni and universities think of alumni. You know, not everyone is going to go from associate consultant up through partner, and Bain recognizes that. And so when it's your time to do the next thing, a lot of people are there to support you. We have a whole network, almost like a business school career team that helps people connect with former Bainies in different jobs and go find different opportunities. And we want people to be, Bain wants people to be successful after they leave Bain. And that I found to be really rewarding and a really surprising aspect, but something I'm very hopeful for, because who knows, this may be the career for me for the rest, but it may not be. And I'm glad that I have a company that's supporting me holistically, not just me when I'm working for them.
Yeah, I think that is also another thing that I think consulting firms and Bain does really well. Because I know, speaking from my experience, like there is nothing like that at JPM where there's like a job board or like them asking me if, like, I don't know, like they don't provide opportunities for me to work somewhere else, etc. Were there any other benefits that came to mind? Because like the international transfer one, the externship, the kind of job board thing, which I think would be great to also explain. Those kinds of things I feel like are not really well understood, or they're not very well known about. Is there anything else at Bain that comes to mind?
Well, a big thing for me is being able to go to business school. So Bain helped me in myriad ways when I was applying to business school. Not only were they very encouraging of me to do it, but because I was in an ecosystem where a lot of people had gone to business school, there were people left and right, sometimes too many people, like raising their hand to read my applications and review my essays and help me figure out what I wanted to do. And that is a really helpful thing. And I think it's why you see a lot of consultants at places like Wharton, because they have a huge team of people around them helping them. You know, we had schools do information sessions at Bain, which I was surprised by too. Like, you know, places like Wharton were coming to Bain to pitch Wharton to us. So that is a huge asset, because for the people that do take on business school, Bain is there to help you along the way in a way that you may not have at another company.
Yeah, and can you walk us through what the sponsorship application process? I mean, what the process is like. I think some people may not know. Basically, if you get a sponsorship from Bain, then you go to school, work at Bain for 2 years after school, and then your entire tuition is paid for. Is that correct?
Correct.
So what's the process like? And then if there are any details that I missed.
Yeah, I mean, the process is, in some ways, it's similar to anyone else applying for school. You know, the school side of it is the same thing. You do your GMAT, you do your essays. However, you have people that are coaching you along the way, as I mentioned. And then there is Bain has to sign off on the sponsorship deal. So essentially, you have to prove that you would be ready for an elevated responsibility 2 years after you are there, because you know, after you get back from school, you're in a more, for most people, you're in a more elevated role, and so you have to demonstrate that you are good at your job now and are on a trajectory where you'd be ready for that job in a couple of years. That process is reviewed internally, and then they either give you a sponsorship offer or they don't.
Is it pretty competitive?
It's hard to say. I don't get to see what happens behind the scenes, so I don't know the numbers of how many people apply or how many people didn't. I will say anecdotally, of the friends that I was going through it with, I don't know people that had challenges getting Bain to bank on their career. Because often when you're someone that is seeking out sponsorship, you are someone that is invested in your long-term career and doing well enough to see yourself in that role. And you're also a person that then is getting guidance along the way to say, if you're not ready now, what is it going to take for you to get ready in 3 months when we're actually making this decision?
And what is it that got you interested in getting an MBA? Because a lot of our classmates come into MBA wanting to go into consulting. So what were the factors that really impacted your decision-making to get an MBA?
There were several factors. One of it is that, as I mentioned, the job moves and evolves really quickly. And so within a few years, I was going from being an analyst in the corner taking notes to running my own client meetings and supervising people. And while I felt that I had the support system at Bain to do that and be successful there, I also knew that business school was going to provide me a lot of the leadership and management and even just business acumen that was going to be useful on the job. Because with each stage, I was just going to get more responsibility and more client work. And spending some time at school to learn more about business was going to be really useful. So I saw that. There's also obviously the added benefit of that someone was betting on me and willing to support my education, which is hugely valuable. Because business school is expensive, and also knowing that I could do it with the security blanket of having a job after was really valuable. And then finally, I saw Wharton as a place where I could go and open up my network and my career in different ways that I wasn't considering. Bain was my first job out of school, so I didn't get a chance to see and explore a lot of different things. So spending a couple of years learning from people like you, learning from all our different classmates was really valuable. And that was something I was hoping to get out of it, which I have.
What is like a lesson that you have taken away from the past 2 years that comes to mind for you?
Oh, so many lessons. One of my favorite classes was Professor Zeke Hernandez's Advanced Global Strategy. Zeke is a brilliant guy, and his class is so good. And he taught us to think about the world in a very different way and gave us really concrete frameworks about how to analyze whether or not a company should be entering a new market or what is the value they might get from moving from their home country to a new country. And those are really useful skills because, as I mentioned, we work with a lot of multinational companies. And so it's not just about how do we sell things in our home market, it's how do we sell things around the world? How do we think about our processes and people globally? And Zeke's class for doing that was really useful. So that, along with 10,000 other things I've learned in business school, but
going back to business school, like over this past summer, you worked at Duckhorn, which Bain kind of helped you along that process. So can you talk a little bit about your experience at Duckhorn and also how Bain helped you get that internship?
Sure. So for context, for people that don't know, the Duckhorn portfolio is a medium-sized wine portfolio. They own a bunch of different wine brands, mostly selling in the US. The biggest, also a public company, the biggest brand they own that a lot of people know in addition to Duckhorn is Decoy. It's like a white label with a little duck on it. So I found that internship, as you mentioned, through Bain. Bain has, given we are this established business and in the client services business, we've developed a lot of business connections. And we have a job board for people that are in business school of different companies that are interested in hiring Bain people for their summer internship while in business school. So that's how I found out about Duckhorn. I really loved my time there. I was living in Sonoma, California, like driving to a vineyard every day, which is a hard setting to beat for a job. But at the same time, I was learning skills that were really practical. I was doing corporate finance there and financial planning. Duckhorn, as a public company, has to project earnings calls and has to forecast what their revenues and costs are going to be. And I got boots on the ground experience doing that, which made me gave me better understanding of finance, which I can go and bring back to Bain too. So it was a really fun experience, but also got some practical, useful skills there too.
And one last question about your Wharton experience. What is something about business school that you going into the experience were super surprised to learn about?
One of the things that I think Wharton could do a better job of promoting, because I really enjoyed it, is in a lot of our classes, we have guest speakers, and they are often what makes a class really amazing. Yeah. I took one class that was on sports business, and over the course of the semester, we probably had 6 or 8 different guest speakers, and they're all like, maybe I was just naive. I didn't realize that we were going to have like CEOs and people running businesses and running some of the coolest startups coming and speaking to us. And they would, like, all these people like come to classes, and some of them are Wharton alums, some of them just want to come and talk to Wharton students. And that is something that was awesome and made it feel not only we're not just in a classroom, we're also learning what the business world is like. So I loved having guest speakers in classes.
Yeah, I totally agree. A lot of my favorite classes were were based on like the speakers that were brought in, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now to kind of go more towards fun like questions to wrap up the interview. One that I have is, if you were in an alternate universe, what kind of career path do you think you would pursue? So if you were not a consultant, what else do you feel like you'd be doing?
Well, the boring answer is that I would be an industrial engineer, because that was the most natural path after college. But the fun answer, if you were to ask like me as a 10-year-old, I would be the general manager of a baseball team. I love baseball. I would love to be in charge of baseball. And I've actually explored some of the sports business stuff in school. I think that would be the most fun alternate universe, is if that I worked in the sports world. But, you know, the more practical answer is that I probably do industrial engineering somewhere.
As a consultant, that path is still wide open, right?
Fair.
You could still actually end up doing that. And next, can you tell me about like a mentor that has made a really significant impact in your life?
Yeah, I've had a lot of mentors. I've been really thankful, and I've been really fortunate in that way to have a lot of people looking out for me in my career. One that comes to mind is one of my PD advisors at Bain, one of my professional development advisors. He coincidentally was a person that interviewed me, and we hit it off in the interview. And then he ended up being the first senior manager that I worked for on a team. And then after a year and a half, as I mentioned, my current professional development advisor, he left. And even though I worked for him for a bit, I switched to the manager, the person that interviewed me. And he's always looked out for my career. What I really appreciate about him is that he always gives really honest feedback. Like if there are times where I just wasn't seeing the bigger picture right, or times where I wasn't giving the effort that he thought I could, he would push me. One of our classmates said to someone in class the other day about his great mentor, and said that his mentor always told him that he was his coach and not his cheerleader. And I think what was amazing about the mentor that I had is that he was both of those things. He was a really effective coach and also a really effective cheerleader. You know, on days where I was struggling a little bit more or didn't see the best for myself, he was there to cheer me on, but he was also there to coach me and make me a lot better. And he's a big reason that I'm in business school and, you know, enjoy the job and was successful at it.
Yeah, kind of both good and bad cop at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
And then last, if you were to go back to 18-year-old Josh and you could give him personal and or professional advice or say anything to him, what would you say?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. I had this feeling, and I'm still working on it too, but especially then, that asking for help on, you know, homework or a project, or even just like in how I was feeling, was a weak attitude to have. And it really hurt me. Like there were friendships that I had that weren't as strong. There were times I didn't do as well in school that I could have, because I was unwilling to admit that I didn't know something and that I couldn't just work really hard to solve it and figure it out on my own. So if I were to give myself a piece of advice, it's ask for help. Like, people are there and want to see you successful. And just because you ask for help doesn't mean that you're incapable or weak. I don't know. I think it was just sort of inherent in me that I felt the sense of independence that I needed to prove myself all the time. And I still feel that a little bit too. But a lot of people were really there when I needed them. And I think if I had started asking for help earlier, I would have been even better off than I am right now.
Yeah, well, you're not at a bad spot now, but I do think that that's something that I struggle with as well. And maybe it's just something that a lot of people who work in, somewhat ambitious, have drive, feel like they can handle things on their own. But, I think I totally agree. Asking for help when you feel like you need it is great advice that I personally this is a helpful reminder for myself too. But just wanted to thank you so much, Josh, for your time, providing all the insights and advice that you did and the stories. So yeah, thanks so much. And that pretty much wraps up this conversation, I guess.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Thanks, Josh. All right, so that concludes the episode. Hope you all enjoyed and learned a lot about what life is like at Bain and how to break into consulting. As a friendly reminder, if you're thinking of applying for an MBA, be sure to check out TTP for GMAT prep and also my course Liquid MBA if you need help with getting into your dream school. That said, thank you so much as always for tuning in and hope to catch you all in the next episode.